Welcome everybody. Good afternoon and happy Friday. Thank you for joining in for us on another episode of Career Sitrep. It's great to see you all, and I'm sure a lot of people are logging in. This is going out live on YouTube, on Facebook and on LinkedIn. So it's great. So welcome to you all. For those of you who are returning, fantastic. And for those for your first time, it's really great. So, gosh, what's been happening? An awful lot, actually, since our last Sitrep. And we do tend to do this as a regular routine thing. It's the first one in 2023. Covered a lot of ground, actually, last year. So just recently, we're still probably in a job seekers market at the moment. But interesting with the cost of living crisis going on and costs rising, how long will that continue? And how long will companies still be interested in recruiting people and etc.? So we're in that sort of thing. But today I want to cover an interesting subject, and we want to really go into the opportunities for service leavers as modern apprenticeships, as modern apprentices. So many people might have some images in their mind about apprentices, going back to some sort of traditional thing, young lads in overalls and that sort of thing. And really what we want to cover this afternoon is to really show how much that has changed and how many opportunities, not just for younger, but for older, across all sorts of areas. And we're going to cover all this in a very exciting way this afternoon. So do tune in, do make comments, do post things, as you'll see as we go along. Now, it's not going to be me just chatting, for the next 55 minutes or so. I certainly couldn't do it on my own, but I'm delighted to say I've got a fantastic a group of guests to join me this afternoon with you. Starting off with Paul. So we've got Paul Smithson, who is director at Zenith Training up in the Northeast, but got to work right across the UK. Fantastic work employing apprentices, lots of training and all that sort of thing. So really look forward to Paul to see what you've got to say about all that, which is really great. Second, we've got Catherine Osborne. Catherine Osborne, former Royal Air Force, a few years back, has been outside for about 10 years working on the Future Horizons part of Career Transition Partnership, and works for Forced Employment Charity after a distinguished time in the Royal Air Force, and now a real specialist in youth and this whole subject. So really looking forward to what you've got to say, Catherine. And lastly, Nick Morrissey, who's joining us. Nick was Royal Marine about 6-7 years, has been out for a couple of years and is now taking part in one of the apprenticeships, one of the amazing ones that Amazon are pushing out to become a trained software engineer. So that's very exciting. So Nick, it's great to see you, and look forward to what you've got to say. So welcome everybody, and as I say, this is a free-flowing chat about this sort of subject. And perhaps what I want to do, just to kick it off, really, is to think about for our own transition period, if you like, and what we actually found ourselves. So perhaps I just might want to give Catherine, what's your sense? I mean, how did you find it? But did you get some good information? Did you get some good advice? If so, where did that come from? How was it for you?
Yes, I had some fantastic advice, and advice I didn't actually think that I needed. I was a bit of a sort of, I can manage this by myself, even though I had a very difficult time because I left very quickly. I was medically discharged, so it all came as a huge shock, and so I had to get a lot of things in order very quickly. And jumped straight in with the CTP. I didn't get my run up of a couple of years that a lot of people get when they're transitioning. So they had no preparation time and a great deal of uncertainty. But I really felt that I had the support that I needed from the CTP and the connections through Officers Association and some other charities. Whilst I say I was sort of very sort of strong-minded and know I can do this by myself, at the time, when you're sort of progressing through it, I realized how much, the help really sort of stopped me from falling off a cliff when I left. And I had a fantastic experience going through the 3-day workshop, and some particularly good advice about CVs, which I can elaborate on later. But absolutely kept me going through a really quite traumatic process.
And that's very interesting, Catherine. I mean, as I say, for a lot, people's experiences are different, but for a lot, it is quite a challenging experience. And you say, for those who are medically discharged, about to leave at quite short notice, like the Future Horizons program for early service leavers. And it all happens quite quickly. Why we need support mechanisms, and actually why the subject today is going to be very useful, because certainly in the early service leavers, they're particularly good for potential apprenticeships. But thank you, Catherine. Nick, how was it for you a couple of years back?
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago, I guess, about 3 years. I thought the information available was really good if you wanted to pursue certain avenues. But I knew I wanted to be a software engineer, and CTP at the time, weren't really aware of how to help me really. So I didn't have a huge amount of direct support in trying to get into the profession that I wanted to get into. Apprenticeships definitely weren't mentioned. I don't think people really knew they were about for what I wanted to do. But fortunately, finding the apprenticeship with Amazon made that transition quite easy for me, really. And yeah, it kind of sorted me out where I wanted to be. I initially sort of dispelled it, but yeah, because I managed to find this apprenticeship, it made my transition much easier than I thought it was going to be when I initially was looking to sort of pursue this role.
Great, and we look forward to hearing a bit more about the detail. But I mean, you're about sort of halfway through your process at the moment. Are you a couple of years into a 4-year thing?
3 years, so I'm nearly done. I've got
3 years. Wow.
left. Yeah,
yeah.
No, it's really been that long. But yeah, I'm closing in on the end.
No, it's really good to hear. And I know Paul, as an employer and a training provider and everything, I mean, what's your sense of what you see coming out of the armed forces? I mean, you must have seen quite a few people. What's your experience?
Yeah, we support a lot of kind of ex-service personnel into apprentices if it's kind of their first role. And the other way that we support people is if they've already got a job and to use the apprenticeship funding alongside a current existing role to give people that that training and support whilst in a role. And I think the whole point of myth busting, it's not just ex-service personnel. You're not alone in thinking like that. Lots of people still think apprenticeships are just for 16 to 18-year-olds, when really what we do is we just kind of substitute the word for CPD, continued professional development. That's all it is. It's a way to get training on the job, and it covers everything from your knowledge, skills, and behaviours in the workplace. So it's a really good way to support kind of your first job, second job, right through from entry level through to management roles.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it'd be great. We'll go through a lot of detail actually about it, and actually importantly, what employers see in terms of the values of service leavers. This great cohort of people. It's good. I mean, actually, I have to say, I'll put my hand. In fact, hopefully, you've noticed. For those, I've got a very nice mug here, which is I support apprentices. How about that? I'll make sure I don't spill my tea. I was actually Royal Navy for 33 years, so we've got quite a nice joint gathering across the amongst our guests today. I mean, I did 33 years left in 2010, and actually a job opportunity came up which I applied for, and actually the initial bit was relatively straightforward. So I went to a company called Raytheon, and actually, dare I say, the support which existed, I didn't really need in the first instance, but after about 4 years, I absolutely did need it. Because things came to an end on that particular area, and wanted to move on, that's when I needed to engage with support. And but it was quite good, really, because it gave exposure to me of some of the challenges that what it feels like sometimes when you're trying to start a new career and you're trying to apply for things and you get turned down for interviews. Anyway, all those sort of things. Well, that's very interesting. I know we've got a lovely cross section, frankly, this afternoon of experience of services, lengths of service. And time out and everything, and obviously with Nick as currently going through the process, which is really useful. So I think before moving on to specifically, I want to just think about what we think the attributes that we had. I mean, perhaps starting with Paul. I mean, you touched on it just then, but what do you think are the key attributes that you see that service leavers bring to the civilian workplace?
Typically, the apprentices that we supported, the things that stand out are kind of firstly the communication skills of people. It's at a certain level of professionalism. Quite often people don't know how to differentiate between communicating internally, externally, how to compose different types of communication, whether it be email, presentation, reading body language, all those kind of those subtleties that that we have to work very hard with training and supporting people with. People, kind of ex-military personnel, those attributes, 99 times out of 100 are there and are exemplary. Often they're very organised. So in terms of punctuality, ability to turn up, we get a lot of people not turning up for interviews, not a lot of people not doing what they say they will do. We don't have that with ex-military personnel. So those key personal characteristics and traits, the vast majority of employers that we work with say that those key core personal skills are more important than particularly skills that can be taught, that will be taught through the apprenticeship. So they're the key things and key traits that are priceless for employers.
I think I would also add that a willingness to learn new skills. You find that in the military, obviously, when you're going through training, you're almost in an apprenticeship of sorts, because you're being paid to learn. You're doing on-the-job training. You may be gaining, you're gaining some form of qualification, if you like, maybe not an accredited one, but you know what I mean. It's all work-based learning, and you're constantly training and turning your hand to something new. Which I think, if you're sort of stepping sideways when you leave service into a new career and going into an apprenticeship where you're starting up, in a new role, that does allow that transition of going into an environment when you're working and learning, so that leap isn't too great. It's something that you can apply yourself to, which is great for employers, because your mindset is already there. I think that's a real quality that service leavers can bring to an apprenticeship.
No, I think the other thing that we see is the questioning skills. So there's never a stupid question. It's kind of questioning and understanding why things are being done, and trying to get kind of deeper into creating a solution, or really understanding kind of what the role is and the purpose of the training and the purpose of the apprenticeship. And having that, being used to studying and learning is kind of, it's not unique, but having the self-discipline to do the off-the-job hours part of the apprenticeship, and to really blend and understand and apply the learning to the job. Because if an apprentice can do that, they really then can demonstrate, quite clearly they're a really valued employee. They can make a real difference.
It's a really good point, I think. What both of you make, the sort of resilience and reliability bit, and actually sort of being able to turn up and be there in this day and age. I think it's a really good thing. There's a nice comment here actually from Claire. I would have thought many military persons have great leadership skills. I mean, it's true. I mean, leadership is. I mean, there are certain things which people, we have. There are some certain skills which I think people have, which they've actually acquired. It might be air engineers or some nuclear submariners, but a lot of them are transferable things, which we've just been talking about. And leadership is a key thing, isn't it? And it's not just about, you don't have to be senior. It's from really quite junior people across all three services are actually leading people, and also it means that they're capable of being led, which is another good thing. They're used to that, I think, when they come to into the workplace. But I mean, Nick, I mean, these are very, very useful things. How many of these things do you think we all know when we are serving? We're aware of it. Were you aware of these things, for example, when you were still serving?
I guess no. I think you're surrounded by people that all have the same skill set, so you sort of don't realise that it can be a unique thing and an advantage in the sort of civilian workplace. I definitely think the attributes mentioned, sort of confidence to say, if I can do this if I put the effort in, and the fact that you are willing to put the effort in goes a long way. I definitely felt on my apprenticeship that all the resources and help has been there, but you have to get after it yourself, and that sort of self-starter ability to work hard definitely massively helps. And it's something you don't necessarily think about yourself as having, but the military definitely instills in you.
And that's a really interesting point. I mean, and I think it's a genuine thing that when most people are serving, they aren't really aware of what these are, because you're just used to it. And it's only when you start going through the process, and certainly afterwards, when I look back and think, you can actually recognise these are attributes which employers really, really like. I think, Catherine, I like what you said about the training piece, and it's I mean, everyone knows that people in the armed forces are well trained. I mean, people say that, but I think it's worth saying that it's not just again, more senior people. The most junior infantry soldier does 6 months training. And so you compare any other industry sector for people joining at the beginning to invest that amount of training. But it's very, very important because it's not just about the training. It's also it means trainable, which I think is your point, Catherine. And coming back to you, Nick, now learning new skills, people who have served are used to have been trained. So they are, quote, trainable. That means you can take on new things, as you are doing, Nick, so well. But I mean, Catherine, is there any more to say on the training side? I mean, I think, as I say, it's often talked about, but I think there's more to it, isn't there?
Do you mean from the sort of the apprenticeship point of view, or whilst you're in the
service? Well, it's more widely, but certainly including training. I perhaps it is the point of some specific trained skills are good, but others are more the process of being trained in service, whichever subject it is, whether you're trained to be a chef or trained to be an engineer or trained to be a warfighter or whatever. But then when you come out to whatever job it is, it means you're more likely to be able to take on the training regime that organisation has.
Absolutely. And I think that the great thing about going again into apprenticeship, and you might pick up from this, but I'm a bit of an apprenticeship enthusiast, hence why I'm here. Bang the drum. Apprenticeships sit underneath the big framework. So unlike if you go into a job where the employer, be it from somebody who's working on their own, self-employed, and employing another person, to a big large multinational organisation, you'll go into a job under a different sort of set of employment rules, laws, and so on. But with an apprenticeship, you do have a set framework, so to speak, which I'm sure Paul can always talk about. And so you go into an apprenticeship knowing that there is already this sort of structure that you're going to work through. So there will be, it is a work-based learning program effectively. And whilst most of it will be you're in the workplace, some of it could be that you're at college. It could be that you're at college for 1 day a week. It could be a block release. It could be that you have a on-the-job training and you're assessed on the job. It could be that it's some of the big companies will have their own sort of training academies and send you off for a big block in the middle. And your ability to sort of fit into that environment, to manage your time and sort of understand the flexibility, in your own, the way you manage yourself about, for these days I'm going to be at work and at the time of beginning of college, and I can apply myself to that transition. I can take on new skills. I think is fantastic. And I think that there are so many sectors available to you as an apprentice. There are, I think in England, and this will apply across the 4 nations, it will be sort of replicated. But if we sort of talk about England, to keep it simple, there are 18 sectors. So underneath those sectors, there are about 600 different roles. So there's basically something for everybody. If you come out of service and you've got a general idea about what you might be able to do, it could be that you can take the skills that you've learned. It might be something loosely connected to something that you've already done. So you've actually trained in some form of capacity, you're interested in something already, or you've trained in it, or you want to move entirely across, as Nick has beautifully demonstrated, it's a completely different role, and retrain in something else. So it can take you both ways. It can be a completely fresh start, or an enhancement to something that you're already interested in. And you sit within this wonderful framework, so that you're going to get a set process of going through your employment. You're going to be looked after, hopefully, and achieve an endpoint, which is a really great thing to know. If you come out of the military, where you're in some form of institution, if you like, let's call it that, and you're going into something that's very, very similar, where you're getting a structure, that's a really nice transition, when you're moving on.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting point, actually, about which I don't think I quite clocked in the way that perhaps I should have done, about the similarities between the experience of the military and then going through the apprenticeships, as opposed to just going straight into another company and having to learn it yourself, sort of thing. But so this is a good moment to actually sort of segue into a conversation about more. We've been talking so far about attributes of service leavers, our own experience, which hopefully is useful. I know there's a ton of questions which are coming in, which are brilliant. Please keep them coming through, and we'll start addressing these in a moment. But as we sort of just then start to look then at this opportunity of being an apprentice, apprenticeships, etc. So let's sort of turn our thinking to that. And introduced that very, very nicely. But I mean, what do we now? We've talked about the sort of myth busting a bit. What do we now really mean by modern apprenticeships? Let's say, what is it really which is different from a lot of the senses that many people still have? Paul, what's your view?
If I can just touch on some of the points Catherine just made, I think that structure is absolutely true. And every apprentice and every apprentice's journey should be mapped out. They should have a pathway. They should have an understanding of what knowledge is going to be delivered and at what time and in what order. It's not an absolutely rigid thing. It's able to be flexed. So a decent apprenticeship should, right at the start of the conversation, it should be with the employer and the apprentice. The apprentice's initial skills and their starting point should be assessed, so we know how where the gaps are, where the strengths are, and then the program should be tailored to fill those gaps in. So when they come to the end of their apprenticeship, then a really strong point to pass their endpoint assessment and complete their apprenticeship. And then it should be a two-way conversation with the employer and the employee to really design that journey, so that they know you can see how in the future what that journey is going to look like, and then how it applies to the role. And like I said earlier on, it really is CPD. I'm quite passionate around your hothouse going through school. You get all your education at school, and then if you have the desire, you're lucky enough to go into college, into university. We very much live in a society where that's then your learning done for life. You're ready. Which is crazy. The job that I'm doing now is nothing at all related to my geography and environmental science stuff I did at school. So without CPD and on the job learning and investing in myself, I wouldn't be able to do the job that I'm doing now. And it's and apprenticeships are just such a good way to continue that lifelong learning, to make sure that you can do the best you can. And employers who do it well really map that. They invest in the staff. Whether they're an apprentice or not, they should be invested in staff to make sure that everybody can be as confident and capable to do their jobs. And that structure for the apprenticeship, typically, they can be anything from 12 months or like Nick's up to 4 years, depending on the level. They're from entry level positions, kind of level 2, which is kind of pre-A levels, right through to degree level apprenticeships. So there's such a wide range of avenues for people to do. And an apprenticeship should just be seen as a really well-structured way to deliver high-quality education and CPD for employees.
And as you said there, Paul, the degree apprenticeships they're an amazing opportunity. They're growing in numbers. I've seen them in my short time, since leaving the RAF and in this role, I've seen the numbers grow vastly in the sort of the levels increasing. There've always been a fair few level 2s, which has grown, but certainly as the sort of the higher education apprenticeships have been trailblazed, right up to master's level. But the great thing being that you can go straight into the workplace, so you're picking up those skills on the job, which is amazing, as Nick will be a great advocate for and you're getting paid, so you're not getting those huge loans out and sort of all the debt from tuition fees at university. You're working, you're ahead of the game because you're gaining all that workplace skill, all those contacts. You leave with I think the stats are you stand to potentially about 150k more from completing an apprenticeship at the moment. That's sort of the government stat of how far ahead you'll be by taking on an apprenticeship, relative to peers who haven't done the same sort of pathway. So they are in so many ways at every level a great opportunity.
And what we're starting to see a lot more of now, and I think it's not just kind of the general public and people not understanding what apprenticeships are. I think employers didn't fully grasp and understand the opportunity that lies within apprenticeships. But over the last year, we've kind of, since we've come out of the pandemic, we're having a lot more conversations with employers, really truly mapping in apprenticeships into roles within the businesses, and then creating career pathways that are mapped to apprenticeship journeys. So companies are really trying to leverage and make the most out of the kind of the funding that's there to really enhance opportunities, because of like Alistair's talked about at the start around it's a job seekers market. I would agree with that. So employers are now very much thinking around, well, if I don't invest in my staff, I'm going to lose them to go to another company that has got a much better learning and development program for their staff. So So companies are really mapping in apprenticeship routeways now into roles, and when people are going for jobs, with it being this sort of marketplace, challenging employers and having conversations around CPD and using it as a tool to find out if the role's right for you.
I mean, that's a great point, actually. I mean, completely. In fact, actually, Tim Anderson just come out with a point here. It's going back to this perceptions thing about a lot of people have no idea, and their impression about people who have served just think it's something about marching around, I think, or just shooting guns without any real idea. Luckily there's some really good employers who do know. I think the sense I have is that this is complete change now, and certainly in the way the government policy going back to 10, 15 years ago, when there's huge encouragement, if going back to everyone should go to university and this sort of thing. And now there's a complete change because, as you say, Catherine, I mean, the costs of going to university are quite considerable and you're paying for it. You have to take out a loan. This is a way you can avoid that, but still get qualifications which pay well, and you're paid doing it. So there's a huge different incentive, I think. I just want to touch on it when we're talking about what we are talking about. And actually, that's interesting about what Robert says. Lack of commercial experience. That is one of the barriers. I mean, I think we've all seen, which stops some people think they're going to be able to get into a good role, and yet there are ways around it about demonstrating commercial experience or nous, which unless people have been engineers dealing with companies, perhaps when they're serving, most people do not actually in service. So there are ways around it. But when we're looking at the thinking about the sorts of apprenticeships, going back to where it used to be, largely the trades. What's the scope now? And obviously, Nick is doing you're doing this amazing course, which is very different. But what other sectors are now covered in scope now with apprenticeships?
I think the wide range of apprenticeships that are out there at the moment, it's I would say almost the vast majority of sectors are covered. Everything from, honestly, there is such a wide range of apprenticeships that have been created. It would be hard to say that there isn't an apprentice or a journey for certain roles. It's much easier to say which, and it's easier for me to tell you where there isn't an apprenticeship. It's easy, otherwise, there is something for everyone.
That's interesting. That is interesting. Did you think, Nick? I mean, were you surprised that when you heard that there was one in software engineering, or did you, when you were going through the process initially, did you think that it was back to the trade stuff? Or was it a surprise to you?
Yeah, it was a massive surprise to me. Firstly, when I saw it, I was surprised that they were doing them. But secondly, I almost dismissed it out of hand. I thought, what's an apprenticeship to me? I'm married with a mortgage and 2 kids. There's no way I can do this. And I felt quite disheartened because basically I felt like I'd been shut off from the career path I wanted to do. But when I looked into it, in real terms, my apprenticeship from the beginning was a pay rise. From my time in the military, I felt that, and my course was the first course run by Amazon for software engineers. So you'd expect it to be bumpy, but it hasn't been bumpy at all. And as Paul said, the sort of laid out plan for where we were going to finish at the end, and we sort of exceeded that now. So if you were to compare, we're talking about degree. I'm on a degree apprenticeship, but if you compare, say, myself and another apprentice I work with the graduates they hire that have spent time at university, we're going to be hired at a higher grade than they are, and yet we've been learning for the last 3 years. So yeah, very surprised to find that there was a software apprenticeship, and basically to find out that it's the better path to pursue, really, than in many ways than going to university, which is a surprise for a job that traditionally requires that pathway.
I mean, I think it's a key strategic point, for a lot of people watching or listening in. That it is we've talked about the myths and everything, but it is no longer, it should be seen. I mean, the opportunities here are huge, aren't they? And I think for the other incentives about actually getting paid and all the rest of it, and these new sectors, and the fact, as Paul says, right across the board. And if the assumption is don't think of a few sectors which do it, almost say it's across the board. There might be a couple which aren't, but make the assumption that they're available completely. I think there's an interesting thing about your experience, Nick, and about and I mentioned about Future Horizons, and that's those people who serve for just a couple of years or less than 4 years. But actually, is this something? I think this is something good for people who've spent more time coming in who want to change of direction. And perhaps you're a good example of that, Nick. Do you really see it? There's, compared to your military career in the Royal Marines, this is very different, isn't it?
This is very different, and I think before I was going from the Royal Marines to a sit-down job where I stare at a computer screen the whole time. In a civilian environment, I guess I was concerned, but it's the transition has been really easy because the apprenticeship has been well laid out, the support's there. You're treated like a grown-up from day one. Again, another misconception, I thought I'd be making the tea, which is not what you want to do when you want to become, fulfill that sort of job role or become as good as the job role that you want to be. So yeah, I think this has been a really good route, and I even for people who've been in less time as well as a long time in the military, I think it's been a great way to transition.
Excellent. No, it's good. Now, there's an interesting question here. I'm with you, Theophilus. Are there degree apprentices in finance and law? And I come back to Paul's point about most of the time there are, but I'm not sure about the answer to that one. Do you know, Paul? Finance and law?
There are definitely degree apprenticeships. There are apprenticeships in accountancy. There are apprenticeships in financial services. So they're all kind of FCA compliance and all of those sort of things. And law, yes, I'm fairly certain with law. I know we work with solicitors where we don't train at that level personally, but we do all kind of business admin and within law firms. So yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because there is, of course, a business incentive, isn't there? I mean, there's the levy, the apprenticeship levy, which is a tax relief for employers. So it wouldn't surprise me, even quite small law firms might want to do this. So there's an incentive on employers. But I think there's an interesting point here. I mean, we're talking about the levels when to do it. Yes, people who've not spent that long in the services, but also those who spent quite a significant amount of their time in service. Big change, going to opportunity to upskill, do something new, do something different. And actually, it's pretty tied into the skill gaps in the country. I mean, people, perhaps in the past, I'm not saying the government, certainly the Department for Education was trying to encourage people into whatever they wanted to do. And there wasn't much of a mismatch with where the skills are missing. And I think it's fair to say right now, there's some big skill shortage. We know some of these. But do you think, Paul, that this is a good opportunity to help to address those?
Totally. And it's in the sectors where we're going to need the skills in the future for the future economy. Just going back to the previous question, I'll just Google this. There's a legal administration level 2, a paralegal level 3, probate technician level 4, chartered legal executive level 6. So we get into the degree level, licensed conveyancer, and a solicitor level 7. So there's really quite a comprehensive pathway there. And you won't typically have one training provider that'll deliver it all, but a good employer will select different training providers and have that CPD journey mapped. But going back to your initial question, Alistair, absolutely, the kind of and the good thing about apprenticeships at the moment, they're always under review, so they're being updated and making sure that they're kind of industry relevant. So that the way the apprenticeships are designed, they have these trailblazer groups that sit at the top of them, and then they make sure that the content of the apprenticeship is industry relevant. It's not outdated. It's not no longer required or out of touch. So that the content's always being continuously updated in terms of what needs to be delivered as a part of an apprenticeship.
I mean, that's a massive thing, isn't it? I mean, again, adds to the opportunity, but it's I wouldn't say it's the moral thing, but if it's something which is actually addressing skill shortages across the country, which strategically the country needs, it's a key thing. But I think it also means, I mean, even I know we mentioned sort of trades was the initial thing, but of course those still exist. And again, many trades across the country are now undermanned or have huge skill shortages. But actually, we've all probably lived in areas where calling out for a plumber or a carpenter or whatever, and the rates they can charge now, because there are relatively few of them, are quite high. I mean, so I suppose it touched on the thing about what's in it. Is what's the salaries like? I mean, Catherine, do you have a view on that? I mean, in terms of how is it a lucrative thing to do? People used to say you need a degree and then you're on a different level. A lot of people are now thinking that's no longer the case. What's your view on that?
Oh, do you want me to step
Catherine,
in?
yeah, or Paul, do you want to go cover that one?
I think there's to answer it in a hopefully succinct way as possible. There are apprenticeships, the more entry level, the level 2 apprenticeships that will be advertised at the national kind of minimum wage or the national apprenticeship minimum wage. Those vacancies that we find typically aren't filled because the apprentices do have more wide choice. We typically, as a training provider, are fortunately a little bit more not picky with the employers that we work with, but when we're kind of mapping the apprenticeship into the roles, we're always talking about the national minimum living wage as an entry point, and the salary that you're advertising your roles with will directly relate to the caliber of the applicants that you get in. And typically the levels in which you go up, so you from your level 2s and your level 3s right through to your degree levels, what we find is that the kind of obviously with the higher the level, the higher the salary typically, and often we'll work with companies where they'll have a starting salary, but their remuneration is rewarded as they keep on progress on target with their apprenticeship. So if they're on target with their apprenticeship after 6 months, they might get a pay increment after a year, after 18 months, and that at completion. So there's a financial incentive to completing and finishing your apprentice with the employer. So they're being rewarded for completing their apprenticeship.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I mean, again, hugely important, really. Catherine, have you got anything on that? I think Catherine can't hear us at the moment very well. No, I think it's a very interesting point actually on the numbers. I mean, I've actually got 2 daughters who did go to university. They're 32 now, and only one of them has just paid off her debt, the loan, the student loan, and the other one still hasn't yet. I mean, it's something you can't see. I mean, and I don't want to sort of be critical about all university degrees, because I think there are some useful, but I mean, it's fair to say when there are some in certain universities on studying certain things, you think, actually, what's the long-term value to either themselves or the thing? What we're talking about here in the apprenticeships, they are available across a huge spectrum of opportunities, which are tied into what the country really needs, and therefore the employability rate is very high.
There are also training providers out there that to make an apprenticeship as a viable alternative to going to university. So you can get the same level of education, but you go by going to university, you get the whole social scene. Yeah. There are training providers out there. We're one of them, but there are training providers out there who really have an enhanced extracurricular curriculum for people to participate in, so they can build their peer-to-peer network with other people across companies. So it's when looking for apprenticeships, there are some really quite nice value-add things that people should be looking for. So so they do the socials. They'll bring together apprentices for specialist talks or personal development over and above what their apprenticeship is about. We're kind of us specifically, we're just about to become carbon neutral, so we're going to be doing a lot of kind of ethical things in addition to the core apprenticeship over and above. So the employers we're working with, also we're going to be encouraging them and their supply chains around carbon neutral and how you operate your businesses.
I mean, of course, there's a huge new thing I'll say new, it's not so new now, green industry, renewables, battery technology, where car manufacturing is going into the battery power, all the stuff around the North Sea offshore rigs, etc. It's a huge area, but it might be a good opportunity, Paul, just to give a quick overview about how Zenith works in this space. What you do.
So us specifically, we offer about 19 different apprenticeships. A wide range. We don't do anything higher than a level 5. We work typically within kind of the engineering and manufacturing sector, and within the engineering manufacturing sector, kind of lean manufacturing, things like that. But then we also deliver apprenticeships that are across multiple sectors. So within the digital space, we do content creation and digital marketing. We do the level 4 sales apprenticeship. We do the level 5 coaching professional apprenticeship. So we offer apprenticeships that are kind of a multi-sector. We're based in the Northeast, but we are able to deliver nationally. So we've got certain clients that have got multiple sites across the UK. So kind of and companies see apprenticeships as a way of kind of embedding and changing culture within businesses as well. So if they've got a team leading program or first line management program, they'll bring first line or aspiring managers into cohorts. So they've got standards and cultures the same across multiple sites. And obviously one of the more positive things that come out of the pandemic, it accelerated our we're on a call now, but we accelerated our delivery model in terms of how to kind of embrace technology and embed that into our delivery model. So, it's it's really changed over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of how apprentices are delivered, and it's that mixture between face-to-face, hybrid, digital learning.
That's a tremendous range of things for a company like yours then for Zenith Training.
Well, we chose kind of vocational areas that are multi-sector, so we're not totally limited with certain areas, and where we don't operate, we work in partnership with our local colleges, FE partners, kind of national training providers. Where we don't do something, we'll work with a local training provider in a different area and bring them in and introduce them to them. So we can't do everything, but the ones that we can do, we try to do really, really well.
So I totally encourage people to go onto your website, which will come up in a minute, actually, to make sure they can look at those 19 areas and stuff. There we go. That's Zenith Training, etc. I think it's worth just thinking about when we're trying to think of, what's the routine like to go through this, and sort of the daily routine, the sorts of things that you look at. I mean, Nick, what's your sort of typical day or typical week as you're on your apprenticeship, year 3 or 4 years?
I mean, from day one, the biggest thing for me with my team that I enjoyed was that I was just one of the team. Not special designation as the apprentice doing things that aren't related to the job role. And that means that I do everything a software engineer does day to day. I do a lot of coding, design work, and I'm allowed to pick up, well, not allowed, but I'm encouraged to pick up as much as everyone else does. So that's something I very much enjoy about the job, is that it does feel like a job. It doesn't feel like I'm at college. It feels like I'm doing the job role. But at the same time, I do have my 20% sort of off the job fulfillments. So there can be workshops. So for instance, yesterday I was in London for an in-person workshop with our provider. And then on top of that, I fulfill that sort of off the job by doing other sort of roles, such as mentoring other apprentices or interns. So it's a wide range of things off the job that help me fulfill that sort of academic criteria. And then the rest of the time it is really doing the job and the nitty-gritty of the job as well.
So there's a real lovely sort of mixture of on-job training as well as actually doing the job, and then perhaps some more formalized training, and then stuff which is almost nothing to do with training, like you say, you're going to meetings like anyone would do in a job. So it sounds like there's a real mixture of a variety there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely a massive variety, and all the sort of academic stuff. They try to tie it back into the job, which is great. So it doesn't feel like you're sort of learning things that are not relevant. So I very much enjoy that. I mean, I went to university when I was much younger. For something completely not related to software engineering, I went for English. So I didn't really want to go back into that environment again. I didn't want something purely academic. I wanted my day-to-day to be about software engineering, and it definitely is. And all the sort of learning aspects of it are tied back into the job role really nicely. That's definitely something I enjoy.
Oh, well, of course, it's an area which is huge.
I just went, Nick, do you have to do a project as part of your apprenticeship?
As in a major project, yeah. I'm doing a major project this year, which has been great, because my team, I would love to do lots of things that they don't have capacity to do, and now they have an excuse to do that. I have my major project that can line up with doing something great for sort of the business that also ties into the degree. So it's definitely quite a good marriage.
A lot of the apprenticeships will have a specific project. So for example, on the sales apprenticeship, you have to look at the sales process and find a way that you can improve it and quantify it, and then carry out a project as part of your apprenticeship, and then deliver a presentation and an interview, kind of have a structured interview on your project at the end of it. So it's a way that all the apprenticeships are really trying to be made as job specific, and so you can get you get the time off the job to look at systems and processes as a company, and then your voice is heard in terms of what are your ideas to improve and how can you do that.
Yeah, and I was just going to, that's interesting, talking speaking of experience of age. I was just going to ask a similar point there. So Ian, thank you very much. That's a great question. I was actually going to ask, what the others are like on your course, and actually are there any other military, or are the only military? What's the sort of age profile of the
sorry, is that to me?
Yeah.
So I was the oldest on my lot, and I was 30 when I started. But since then, the apprenticeship in terms of age has been much more varied. So every year they've taken on stage. So my brother, he's close to 40. I managed to convince him to join the apprenticeship as he was leaving the military, and he joined this year. So yeah, there's definitely a wide range. The other apprentice I'm with was 18. Which is crazy to me, because I don't think at 18 I could have done this apprenticeship. It's quite full on. So kudos to him.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that shows the variety, isn't it? I mean, going back 20 years ago, it would all be largely younger, much younger. But I mean, the fact is that younger people can do it, absolutely. But crikey, that's a great breadth of age.
And that's reflected across all of our apprenticeships. We've got apprentices who are doing digital marketing who are in their 60s, right through to 16 to 18-year-olds, the first jobs. The age thing for us, it isn't a thing. We've got it's a full range, and that's including companies that want to use apprenticeships to upskill existing staff, as well as people wanting to recruit into new roles.
I think that's the absolute beauty of apprenticeships, is that we've covered that there are so many sectors, and pretty much anything that you want to do, there is a sector for it. And beneath the sector headline, there will be so many different jobs, and jobs that you've never even considered existed. You think, wow, I can actually do that. I have no experience in that whatsoever, but I can go and get a job doing this, which you would never do with no experience in that role. You get the opportunity to take a complete change in direction and go into something. There are employers with all the different sort of levels of taking on at different levels, from a level 2 up to level 7. So you can fit in with your current sort of level of education and ability. And the fact, like you say, you can go into it at any age, because you can go into it and start out. There's no reason why. And salaries, the salary could be, whilst there is a minimum wage, there's a minimum wage applicable to just sort of standard work anyway, just because it's an apprenticeship. There is a minimum wage, and a lot of employers will pay a lot more. They offer bonuses, and you get all that sort of the extra great stuff. You can go and work for a large company that offer their full-time employees gym membership and cinema tickets and health and all the bits and pieces, and you get that as part of your package as an apprentice as well. So there are so many perks. I mean, we were talking to the Hilton the other day who were taking on apprentices, and you can stay in one of the Hilton hotels in New York for 50 quid a night. So why not? So there really is that you can go into all the different sectors, you can go in all the different levels, you can touch all different salaries. So there should be no age barrier. It's got to, each bit should suit you, and there's a lot to choose from.
No, I'm just thinking of the conversations I've had with companies that since Christmas. We've had conversations around cabinet making apprenticeships, sign making, health and safety, digital kind of content creators. And it's a real, you never know what you're going to go into when you meet with an employer, and it's kind of trying to find out what their needs are and what roles they want recruiting. It's such a wide range.
It's amazing, really, the choice, as you say, choice in so many respects. But I think it would be quite useful just thinking about top tips for people who are interested in going to seek apprenticeships. What would we think? I mean, Catherine, if you start off, what would be your top tips for somebody interested or wanting to find more about this?
I would start out by identifying roughly, the sort of sectors. Maybe you have to browse through all the sectors that are available. Look at the headlines, and see if there's something that interests you. I would imagine there would be. each nation, so you've got England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Wales, will have their own government website where you can go and look sort of postcode area to see what's available currently. But you could also then approach your local colleges, universities, training providers such as Paul's, and approach it from a different angle. So instead of looking at the employers that are advertising, approach the training provider and register with them to say that you're interested in becoming an apprentice. So look for the training provider that covers the sector that you're interested in, and they will be connecting with employers, to find suitable roles for you. But you could also head out and find a local employer that you're interested in, working for, and say, hey, would you like to take me on as an apprentice, and introduce them to apprenticeships.
That's very good, actually. Some really good advice there, good top tips there. No, thank you very much, Catherine. Actually, there's a question for Nick, and I was going to go to you next, actually, what your top tips were, but nice question for you. Kelly, who works with 16 to 24-year-olds, what advice would you give them if you're wondering whether it's the right pathway for them, for 16 to 24?
Yeah, it feels like a while ago for me. No, I'm a massive advocate for apprenticeships, so I would say it is the right pathway for them. I know I shouldn't say that without knowing anything about them, but I think that if you want to break into an industry that you can identify an apprenticeship in, and perhaps you don't have the academic background or the sort of educational certificates that you need to go into that profession, apprenticeships are perfect for that. And if you're also someone who perhaps doesn't want to spend all of their day learning in an academic setting, this is also another great way to go into professions that often require those sort of things. So for me, for my job role, software engineering, I tried a little bit of it before I applied. I went away and I looked at what it involves, and I tried to do a little bit of self-learning, and I did enjoy it. So that's how I knew that it was right for me, at least. But in terms of top tips with that, I guess the biggest one says you don't have to pigeonhole yourself with apprenticeships. Unlike if you're looking straight for a job, you almost have to have the skills already for that job, or commercial experience has already been mentioned. Whereas with apprenticeships, if you have an interest in a field where an apprenticeship exists, you can go for it, because the point is they're going to teach you to do that thing. I did not have the qualifications necessary to become a software engineer before I started the apprenticeship. And I think if I'd said to myself that I had to get the qualifications before I wanted to do this role, I would never have done it. So that'd be my sort of top tip to that.
Very useful. Very useful.
I think the other two bits I would just add to that. All training providers should be able to offer, no matter the age, but their apprentices some pastoral support. So if they've got personal issues, caring issues, life challenges, whatever, that an apprenticeship provider should be there to support them. So we introduced that very day one. We introduced them to who the people are within our business are who can do that, and how to reach them. So whatever the issue, they should be able to support them and help them with the personal side of with an apprenticeship and holding an apprenticeship down. Because what we don't want to do is put someone into an apprenticeship and for them to drop out. So we have a whole piece of pastoral support, but also the other side is if they're thinking about what kind of, like Nick was said, about what sector do they want to work in. It is the absolute minority of people who approach us for work experience. So we offer kind of IAG for young people to come into the office to, we can talk them through it. But if somebody wanted to do a little bit of work experience prior to do it, we've got employers that we work with really closely, and we would be happy to do introductions for people to go and, half a day here or whatever it would look to suit, so they can actually get a bit of a feel for it before they start.
That is an interesting point. I want to come back to it. Actually, JY Zuri's just put an interesting question about the higher end one, the level 3 apprenticeships. I mean, Paul, what's your sense on that? What would you advise on applying for it?
It's a bit of a technical question, that. So if you've got if you're wanting to do a level 3 digital marketing apprenticeship, and you've got a marketing degree, you won't be able to do it, because you should already have a lot of the knowledge already that the funding's been allocated for. But if you've got, like me, I've got a degree in environmental studies, and I wanted to do a level 3 digital marketing, not a problem. You know, if in our shoes, if I had someone with a degree applying to do a level 3 apprenticeship, I'd be over the moon, because I think their English and maths is great, so they should be able to study at that level. They've completed a degree, so they should be able to stick for the lifetime on the program. So I would encourage it. It's just be very kind of, when you're applying for it, the training provider will do a check on your prior learning and what you've achieved. So there might be occasions where you're precluded from doing an apprenticeship because you've got a higher level already. But if you've got a degree in something else and you want to do something totally different, I would just go for it. I would be delighted to get graduates applying.
I mean, that's a great point actually about, you know, the emphasis on new skills, isn't it? New things. It's not actually augmenting or adding on to something if you've got experience in the place. It's all about actually like a career change. It's either starting off into something new or this sort of career change, as Nick's done.
Because at the start of every apprenticeship, the training provider will do a skill scan or some sort of initial assessment. So they'll map the gaps in knowledge, and if there isn't any gaps and the apprentice has got too much knowledge, kind of at that point we would be saying the apprenticeship isn't for you, because you've actually got all the skills already for this route way. You should be thinking of something else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really key. I mean, I think these top tips have been very, very useful. I mean, I think there is, a lot of support out there, I think, and we've already talked about some. I think one I also would mention is the role of, the Forced Employment Charity. There's a lot of material there you can access on apprenticeships, which then feed through to providers like Zenith, etc. So do look at these things. For me, I would say, and actually, of course, all the wider stuff. And if it's not for you, there are other opportunities and job opportunities, which is something we might want to go into. But I think for me, thinking about what you've just been saying about these top tips, there's a few things about having the confidence of the experience and knowledge and things you've brought and skills, etc., in service makes service leavers and veterans, put it that way, incredibly able to do this. Not just be good with employers, but actually to qualify and do very well in an apprenticeship, as Nick has been showing. And it is an opportunity for a career change, and that can happen at any time. It might happen early on, it might happen after a long time in the armed forces. We talked about the age thing, so don't think about the old style archetypal impressions of what apprentices were. Don't think about the age side. It's anything. Don't think about one sector. It's all sectors, and it's all levels. I think that's a sort of key thing. And there's a question. I'll put my glass on. Sorry, from Joanne. Joanne, good to see you. Often encouraging military spouses. That's a very interesting point, actually, to consider apprenticeships, because I know we've been talking about largely this cohort of service leavers and veterans and perhaps some reservists, but also the spouses, partners of serving or people who have left. Again, with the same sorts of resilience and skills and potential to do well in this. So I think it's another, for those working on programs like that, and I know that Forced Employment Charity runs a superb program to support spouses, and apprenticeship increasingly now is part of the thing. So before I sort of just said a few closings, any last thoughts from anybody about that? I think it's been a very, very useful conversation, and I think, well done, Nick. It's inspiring actually hearing your story. Really, how well you're doing. I really look forward to tracking you as you get fully qualified and onwards and upwards in the mighty Amazon. I know they're brilliant. Paul, all the great stuff you're doing, and Catherine likewise in Future Horizons. I think it's fair to say that this is. It's a game-changing moment, isn't it? we mentioned that the government's changed from 10, 15 years back. And so it seems to be taking some time for people to really change their understanding. And that's why it's been a very important conversation for the last hour. I do remember going to a meeting about 3 years ago, and Ewan Blair, who was the son of the former Prime Minister, and he had a company, I think it was called White Hat or something, and he's changed the name of it now. And he was actually very critical of government policy. It's quite ironic because he was actually criticising his dad's policy, if you remember, about university. But he actually was really keen on apprenticeships and promoting it. That's about 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, this has been building up, but now we're in a position where these opportunities do exist right across the country, right across all sectors, and don't worry about what age or whatever you happen to be. There's something in it for just about everyone, and including spouses, including actually when you look at the dependents, because I mean, I know we do operate some programs to support service children. Some people want to go straight from school and straight into this, and there was a great question earlier on. So I think the key things are, if people are interested, remember these top tips, and we covered quite a few of them there. Do your prep, do your research, and the more you do, like Nick, you will end up with one which is, then it's for you. Because some of these you might decide you're going on one particular route, and then you found actually no, there might be, and then shift to something else. So I think the work bit, but overall have confidence, and it's a great environment. So I think it's been a fantastic session. I hope everyone's got a lot. Thank you so much, Lee, for those who've tuned in. Great questions, and I hope we managed to answer them. I hope people have a better understanding now of what is available with apprenticeships. And I look forward to seeing you on the next Sitrep, and watch out for what the subject will be. But until then, happy apprenticeships, and have a good rest of day and indeed weekend. And thanks for joining us. Bye for now.